Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. This is our monthly show where we bring in two strangers who have never met before, just meeting in the green room here to talk about a topic that they're passionate about. Today, we're going to talk about generative AI. And I know there's a lot of passion about this. But also, you're like, Bob, wait a minute. You never repeat topics. You already did this. Technically, we did not. We did do a really good deep dive on AI ethics and all of the details about it way back in season 1. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. It is that we did that one back in like February of 2021, long before any of this stuff is out. But first, let's get into our two guests, and then we're going to get rolling on this topic because we have a lot to go on. Frank, you go first. Fill us in on who you are and what you've been doing with this. And Adam, just pick up right away.
Okay. Hi, I'm Frank Succardi. I'm a gamer and digital artist, and I've been tinkering with AI recently, just to make fast art, B-roll for videos, to visualize stuff. I'm a big Traveler fan, so I thought it would be cool to kind of visualize my Traveler universe. So I kind of made these as postcards from my Traveler universe. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Just enjoying the medium, checking it out and having fun.
He's got some amazing stuff out there. Adam, fill us in. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Adam Berkowitz. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Alabama. I also teach in the MLIS degree program here. So that's the library school. So we train future librarians. And the core of my research is about generative AI. I first came to AI by looking at automated copyright enforcement, and now I look at generative AI. And many of my questions surround the notions of creativity, authenticity, ethics, and legality behind these sorts of behind this sort of content. So I bet we're going to have a very interesting conversation today.
So therefore, Adam, right there, I need you to start putting in some descriptions and definitions for us.
Apologies.
So No. It's good. This is exactly what we need to do for these kinds of things. Tell us, what is the difference in generative AI versus machine learning versus what somebody thinks of as, I'm constantly pointing out, okay, if you're using that big, huge umbrella of AI, you're also talking about Microsoft Word and your spell check. So fill us in on why that's not really the case.
Okay, so generative AI is really interesting. So you mentioned things. So there's lots of different things that fall under the umbrella of AI. And so, for example, a lot of people have heard the term neural networks or artificial neural networks. That actually describes the sort of architecture at play. So essentially, it's supposed to simulate like an organic brain, the human brain, or an animal brain. So that way, an input goes through all of these, goes through many interpolations, many different iterations of decision making, and then the output is supposed to be something that would make sense to us. And so a lot of that is engaged in things like machine learning and deep learning, where these artificial neural networks are quote unquote trained, or really what it is they have mathematical weights applied to each of these decision points or nodes or neurons, in order to determine what is based upon the training data and based upon the user prompt. So the user input, like a question that you would ask ChatGPT, or when you ask Imagen, like create me an image of a teacher in a classroom with students. And so it takes all of that as input, and then it makes a series of a number of decisions, billions of decisions in the blink of an eye, in order to produce what is the most statistically probable output at the end, something that would be most sensible to the human eyes or to the human senses. And so that applies to images, that applies to music or audio, that applies to text. And so when we talk about generative AI versus something like spell check or grammar check, all that's happening in the spell check and grammar check is you have a very, very simple computer algorithm operating in the background that says, you know what, in my library database, in my internal library database, I know ways to spell all of these words. And the way you have spelled this word is not something that I can recognize.
I can find a new unique spelling of anything.
Right. Which is why oftentimes when you like right click, you know, if you're using a PC, or if you hold down, if you're using a Mac, on the word that's underlined in red, it'll ask, hey, would you like to add this to your library? And so now it'll recognize the word from then on. So very different.
Now, Frank, you pick up here and tell us, because you're becoming a very big expert in how to use these things and take all of that stuff that teacher Adam just told us and put it into real terms that somebody's using these when they sit at their computer.
Right. So, well, I use AI as like an office assistant. It's not an oracle. It's not going to like solve all your problems, but as a sounding board or as a research tool or things like that. As a business, you can use it to analyze your target audience and make target audience avatars who you then market to or produce your product for. You can use it to do deep dives on different topics and gather and sort information and data and then turn that into something usable. The raw output coming out of AI is that it's raw and it needs to be curated by a human. If it's an image, it needs to be edited, get the extra fingers out of there, fix whatever. If it's text, a subject matter expert needs to look at that and go, okay, this is a reasonable result and this is what I'm expecting. If you're having AI do work for you that you're not familiar with, you're not going to be able to spot things that you don't know about, that you're ignorant of, right? So you should use it as a subject matter expert, as a subject matter expert's assistant, and you'll get a lot better results out of it. That's been my experience anyway.
I like that. I have grown to very much like the term hallucination, because it's just making something up, which it is is always just making something up. But I like it a lot better than people saying, well, AI lies to you. And it's like, no, it's not lying. It's not smart enough to lie.
Mm-hmm.
If it's lying, that means it knows the right answer and it's telling you something else. Mm-hmm. It's not lying. It never got to a right answer in the first place.
Well, that's an interesting point, because we're constantly anthropomorphizing AI. We're saying that we train AI. AI doesn't train. Like I said, we add mathematical weights to each of these nodes. We talk about hallucinations. AI doesn't hallucinate. It's stuck in some sort of algorithmic loop, or somehow, what's being put into it and what's coming out, while statistically probable to it, is not making sense to us. And that should be concerning. Like, well, hold on, what is it about this that makes sense to it rather than us, which leads us down a whole other issue.
Right.
When we say when we're using ChatGPT or Gemini and we see like the 3 blinking dots, or I guess the latest models don't have that, but when ChatGPT first came out, GPT-3 and 3.5, it had blinking dots in order to indicate to the user that it's loading with information, that it's about to produce information. But it's like the ordinary person would be like, oh yeah, this is it, showing that it's thinking, like the spinning wheel on a Mac or the turning hourglass on a PC, right? But the blinking lights are indicative of somebody texting you. So it's it's meant to evoke a very human sort of interaction, despite the fact that it's a computer system.
Right. I personally don't like the term hallucinating, because when you have an assistant and they're a junior assistant and they make a mistake, you don't go, "You're hallucinating, Johnson." You just, oh, they made a mistake. As a subject matter expert, I caught it. The rest of this document looks great. Thank you, Johnson.
Right.
That's how it goes in my office.
And the interesting thing is that we don't do this with any other form of technology. Like we often say that like a ChatGPT can think, or that perhaps generative AI is also created by AI, right? But we don't do that with other things like tech. Like we don't say that submarines swim, right? We don't apply those sorts of humanistic attributes to other machines,
right?
So,
well, how about, and Adam, your part of your research is in voice stuff, and the A word, the echo, in particular, of everybody's out there. Please say thank you that I didn't wake up any of your devices. What's the difference in that? Because my wife is always like, she did it wrong, or she doesn't understand me, and I'm like,
yeah. Interesting, isn't it, that all of our AI voice assistants are defaulted to the female voice, right? Yeah, it's a really fascinating sort of thing.
It's less threatening, right?
Right, exactly. And so also it's also evocative of like the early years of, a woman's role in the office was to be a secretary, right? That the very now antiquated kind of stereotypical role. Or to be assistive, or to be nurturing, or to be submissive, however it is, right? And so there's a lot of literature around this, I guess, this issue, this idea. Why do we seem to be more comfortable with a female voice as opposed to a male voice? So
it's also ingrained in sci-fi pop culture. I mean, the computer voice on Star Trek has always been female.
That's right. Yeah. Mrs. Roddenberry too. I mean,
So generative AI has been around for a while, but not as long as we've been doing tech and doing all these other things. So tell us, how did you first get creative? Back when you were a young kid, back when were you playing in the mud? Were you dancing? Were you singing, putting on plays for the parents or the other kids? What were you doing to get creative when you were young that built up to exploring things like this?
You want to go first, Adam?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you. So I've been a musician ever since. I first entered my middle school band program when I was like 11 or 12. So I've been a musician for a very long time. I then, when I continued in high school, I participated in marching band, various concert bands. And then in college, I went to Florida Atlantic University, right in the neighborhood, right in Boca Raton, and I got my bachelor's in music, and then I proceeded with my master's in music history. So I then moved over to, I then got my master's in library and information science with the intention of becoming a music librarian, to put all that historical and literary knowledge to work in a library, right? That was supposed to be the idea. Of course, Bob, as you know, I wound up in public libraries, first at the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library, and then right there at Broward County Library. But during COVID, I still have friends. Like, I was no longer a gigging musician, but I was still obviously friends with all of my, peers who were gigging musicians. And so that's actually how I stumbled upon automated copyright enforcement. And that's the idea that AI systems in the background of social media platforms can recognize user uploaded content for the sake of enforcing copyright limitations. So and this is exactly what happened. I had a friend at NYU. He was getting his master's in music composition, and he was, it's during COVID. He couldn't perform anymore. He couldn't give live lessons anymore or anything like that. So he's putting all of his stuff up on YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, etc. And his stuff is being taken down. And he's venting to me about it. And it's just like, why is that happening? And he also sends me a newspaper article about it that was in the Washington Post. And that really sent me down this rabbit hole of the intersection of AI and music, just trying to understand, like, why don't these systems recognize that, yes, one party can own a copyright over recording of classical music, but that doesn't prevent somebody else from also uploading a recording of classical music. It's just not how copyright law works. And so when you get into the minutia of like all of these different business agreements between the music industry and the tech industry and all of how
so we should be happy you decided to go into AI instead of being a lawyer.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I might be a nightmare for some people. So that's where it started. And then as I'm learning more about this, there's a team there's a team between people in Bonn, Germany, and at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And they're trying to complete Beethoven's 10th Symphony using generative AI. And I was totally, was I okay with using AI for content recognition and recommendation? Like, it has its issues for sure, but none of them actually made me feel like, some sort of dry heaving, kind of reaction to the idea that machines were creating art, or that we were using automated methods to create art. And now there's a lot to be said for that as well, because even the musical instrument is a mediating technology for artistry, just as the paintbrush and canvas is, right? But this is the first time where we've decided we're going to offload the intellectual labor and say,
and now you're speaking Frank's language. Tell us, Frank.
So
go for it.
Anyway, so that's how I started delving in more on the generative AI side, just being like, you know what, we need to have a conversation about not just the legality of using AI to recognize issues of copyright infringement, but like, what about all of this generative stuff that impacts the artistry, not just in a legal sense, but also in a sense of what is music anymore if machines are making it.
Right.
So.
And this is the article Frank just wrote earlier this month, exactly on that, Adam.
Oh, delightful.
See, it's amazing. This is the fun part of getting two strangers in who really know their stuff.
Well, I've always been my mother was an artist, and I've always been involved in art. Art's always been a big part of our life. So when I was a kid, it was learning how to color, paint, sew, write, learning how to type, things like that. Later on, and then I got involved in Scouts. So I did things like I learned how to cut, tool, and stitch leather, things like that, fabricate things with my hands. I learned how to, my grandmother worked for a defense contractor as a electronics supervisor. And so I inherited all of her like electronic tools, soldering irons and snippers and things I still have. They're still in my toolkit. They still work. And so I started learning electronics and stuff at an early age and having an interest in that. Then I eventually, I moved to New Mexico. There's a lot of wide open spaces here. Oh, I also am a band. I play the drums in marching band. I went on and when I was in high school, I joined a medievalist society, the Society for Creative Anachronism. I learned how to play djembe and doumbeks and things like that. Penny whistle, play the harmonica. I eventually got over my stage fright and learned to sing, so that was cool. But all along, I always like kind of chase. I really like technology and tinkering, so I've always been like chasing the next thing. Like my grandma sent me out her old Bell and Howell cameras, like an 8 and 16 millimeter camera. They're like wind up cameras, but they had stop motion capability. So I started like animating my Legos, animating clay, and animating people, making short films and stuff like that. So when I moved to Santa Fe when I was 14, I certified on the city's Tascam editing and video camera thing set up. I managed to get into the TV production class at the high school as an underclassman because they didn't let you get in until you were junior. So I got in as a freshman, took 4 years of TV production, and then simultaneously, I'm teaching myself.
Frank, you're not even 20 at this point. How many things did you do?
No, I was a professional programmer at 16. Anyway, so and then I joined. I got accepted into the Los Alamos Science Student Project, building robotic systems, fabricating circuits. I was always really interested in animation and art, though, and I started getting into 3D Studio. Like 3D Studio wasn't around yet, but CAD 3D on the Atari, liquid crystal shutter glasses for holograms. I saved up my money, and that's what I spent it on. Other kids were buying beer and whatnot, and I was spending it on technology. And then when AI came out, I'll just kind of fast forward to now. when AI came out, people were like panicking, their hair was on fire, and like the robots are coming for our jobs. And I was like, I got to check this out and see what the freak out is, because I'm the ambassador to computers. And and I checked it out, and I was like, wow, this is really actually really awesome. And my early tests with it, I just had it, like, I told it some private jokes that we had among our friends and extrapolate more on that, and it got the joke, and I was really just amazed by it. And then after a while, I was like, can I use this thing for business? And so I bought a GPT Pro system, and then I just, I from there I developed the virtual GM and a bunch of stuff like that. But so that's how I went from there to here.
Well, it's really good. And Frank, you've been really involved in the publishing, small press publishing type things, and all the AI intersection of how that works, and how people are being protective of, like Adam was saying, copyright and all these things. Where fill in people, for people like Adam and everybody else out there in the world who don't understand how the real work processes that you've been using for this, because anybody who looks at your stuff knows it's AI, but tell us.
Okay, so, well, a lot of these things are just images from my games. A scene that happened, a character I thought of, a place. What's life going to be like in the far future? And I've always kind of had kind of avoid laundry detergents to clean your vac suit, and different kinds of funny things. What's TV commercials going to be like in the future, and things like that. And I found that this is really a great way for me to kind of sort that out. So for just the stuff I'm knocking around, I might use the raw output, but if for commercial stuff, I'll design something in Blender. For instance, that's the Empress Morava ship from Traveler. So I'll go into Blender, I'll make a base object, and then bring it into the AI software. I usually use Stable Diffusion, and convert it, texturize it, get a planet in the back, the planet looks like crap, fix it. It's people kind of dismiss the creative process because AI is involved, but they don't realize that, like, developing the prompt is just one tiny part. If you're using an art process, you can start with your own sketch. You can start with a 3D render. You can start with just a silhouette. You can draw stick figures, and the AI will figure it out. It's very, very, it really removes the barrier to entry, and gives people who always wondered, like, what does my D&D character look like? Now they can make it. But the trick to doing it commercially is maintaining human control all along. So if you start with a human picture, you elaborate on that, you edit it, you do in painting, you add, I want them to have an earring, I want them to have a nose ring, I don't want them to have a feather boa, or whatever. And so you go in there and you get the picture to like 80%, 90% of where you see it in your brain, and then you use your art skills to go the rest of the way, fix the colors, take stuff out, erase the extra fingers, get the eyes look in the same direction, whatever you need to do to like finalize a thing. And because your human involvement is in there throughout, with the end product is copyrightable. You're not creating a collage of other people's art, which I think is a common misconception. And even if you were, that would be, collages a recognized art form, and that would still be fair use. So there you go. Everything that comes out, unless you're purposefully copying somebody's style, what you're getting is unique. And one thing I never do in my artwork is call out artists, their styles, famous people. One way that people used to get consistent characters is they would call out famous actors or whatever, and then the AI would know what they look like and be able to have them like from frame to frame doing something. But there's other ways of doing that. In Stable Diffusion, you can make like a macro that contains all of the description of your character, and then whenever you mention that macro, it goes and pulls in that information, and that's how you make a consistent character.
So, Adam, tell us about that. How does the generative AI work with voice?
Oh, well,
And the idea, well, what I'm thinking of is some of the things that have been coming out more recently, some of the models that have done where basically you just take somebody's who's got a long running podcast and you take their voice and you take their audio and video, and now you can just go recreate a person or a thing and do that. Tell us about how that, both
yeah,
on how it works, but also your view on the copyright usability type stuff of that.
yeah. My latest work on this, which I co-authored a paper with my faculty advisor, my faculty chair, Dr. Miriam Sweeney, and she has a very long history of writing about AI voice assistants and stuff like that, and so she and I got together to write this paper because of her background in looking at AI voice assistants and my background in looking at the legal and theoretical and critical and ethical uses for these things or development of these things. But basically, the way AI voice works, or the way AI voice cloning works, is that you have a training data set that's already comprised of millions of people's voices, specifically voice imprints, and so those are essentially encoded snippets of people speaking or singing or what have you. And so the data that's extracted from those voice imprints are really in two parts. One, they extract your speech patterns. So some of us may speak with a certain cadence, with a kind of, maybe some of us, speak really quickly, some of us speak really slowly, the way that we articulate things. Certain people have speech impediments for whatever reason. All these sorts of things go into behavioral biometrics, is what they're called, essentially. The idea that speaking is a pattern of behavior. The other aspect that's extracted are the actual timbral qualities of your voice. So these are like, do you have a rough sounding voice or a gruff sounding voice? Do you have a high pitched and sort of, pure tone kind of voice? So
My wife teases me and says, use your NPR voice.
yeah. So right, people who have like a voice for radio tend to have a kind of voice that is low and calming and a very, usually when they're speaking, very distinct and definite pitches within the way that they speak. Whereas other people who sound very raspy in their voices don't have very definite pitches. And so there are all different sorts of technical jargon, technical descriptors to explain what it is that machines are extracting from these voice samples or from these speech or vocal samples. And so, but those are essentially the two, I guess, baskets of data that AI is essentially drawing from. And then,
And now, Adam, as part of that, so as Frank was just mentioning, people were used to, they still do, unfortunately, pick a person to make images based on.
Yeah.
Picking someone's voice to do this, and I'm about to use terms and somebody can define them later on for people. The inference model versus the learning models. When you're picking a learning model, like you were just saying, you're grabbing these baskets of vocal pieces.
Yeah.
And the inference, the one that develops it, can you pick a very specific, tell us the difference, I guess, in picking a very specific person versus just say, I want a male voice?
Yeah. So it's kind of what Frank was saying before, that like, like a specific voice versus like a collage of different characteristics that are kind of put or assembled all in one particular thing, where it's like, it's not, and that through the art, I don't want to take away from what Frank was saying. Yes, there's an artistic process, there's a post-production process after an AI has rendered something from your prompt. In this case, that doesn't really happen if you're just a basic entry-level end user. So an inference model might give you something very generic, something that isn't any one particular person's. And remember, that would be voice and speech patterns. And so it's combining a bunch of different kinds of characteristics in order for it to sound just like a person. But even for it to sound just like a person, there's still certain sorts of cultural markers that come along with voice. So for example, if you didn't have, if I didn't have my video on, you might infer things about about who I am. I mean, regardless of the fact that this is actually my voice or not, perhaps you say that, no, this is just some generic voice that we hear. So for example, Siri, not the original Siri, because that was actually a very specific person. But the later models of Siri, like, who is that? And so a lot of times Apple will say, well, we based it on somebody who we have paid who will remain anonymous, and then we've gone through and our model also includes like other characteristics that make it a little bit different, and it's not actually any specific person. Whereas the other models, if you ask it like to make a clone of this particular voice, that training data is already in there. So actually a really good example is the Sky voice from ChatGPT 4.0, and this is something that's mentioned in our paper. And so a lot of people thought the Sky voice, which is no longer available and was taken down soon after it was realized, that it sounded a whole lot like Scarlett Johansson. Scarlett Johansson was not too pleased about that, right? And we can get to the legality of all that stuff later, but the question is, like, why did people think it sounded like Scarlett Johansson? Even like family members thought it sounded like her. She herself thought it sounded like her. Many of her fans thought it sounded like her, but even so, it didn't sound like exactly like her. So she might have been the base model for, like, her voice may have been like the base input or base model to then add other things onto it. So, but we can get into the legality.
There's tremendous. And also, by the way, all the links to both Frank's and Adam's stuff is all in the chat for you. So you can go follow up and read it and go look at all these models that Frank's been talking about building and creating, and all of these papers that Adam has done, because there is no way we're going to get to all this in an hour.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I want to double back on something though for that, because I want to hear, what is the sort of equipment that you started with, and particularly here with as these different models have developed and grown and done things? What is it that you both started with as trying to learn, and then how those have progressed now? And I know it's kind of an idea of just growth over just 2.5, 3 years, but still. Go, Frank, tell us, how did things...
Well, when I first started, I was just for some reason I didn't want to use, I don't like to do what everyone else is doing. So everyone else is going to like Mid-Journey, and I was looking at Night Cafe, and then I realized, well, you know what, people are complaining about the features and stuff. I could just be running this on my own computer, and then I don't have to worry about, oh, it uses so much energy, oh, it does this, it does that. It's running on my own computer, on my own graphics card. At the time I had a GTX 1650. I think it was just a low-end kind of just graphics card that I'd been using. And so then I upgraded to an RTX, and boy, it went so much faster rendering the images. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at now. It's just a mid-range RTX. I think it's I wrote it down. It's a 3060, but there's the highest end is the 50 or the 5000 series. That would be nice to have. And I'm just running on an i7, a mid-range i7, workstation. A 9.9 would be great. But again, you can, if you have a decent video game computer, you can run Stable Diffusion and create stuff really fast, or pretty fast.
That's good, because I know that is one of the things we're really not going to discuss some of the background stuff like that. I'd love to on another show talk about all the infrastructure stuff that goes into making this all happen for people, and the pluses and minuses of all of that. As Frank just said, there's some definite negatives to this. We're not glossing over anything here, but we're trying to get with how people and why people are doing this right now, rather than some of the other things. Tell me, what did it build your tools that you were using. You said you're starting to do stuff
Yeah,
during the
yeah.
pandemic, and then
Well, before I go on, I do want to touch on the fact that Frank mentioned he was a percussionist, and I just want to say I'm very happy to be speaking with a fellow percussionist. So that is also my instrument. So very cool. So, what kind of AI tools or generative AI tools did I start with? Well, keep in mind that when I started like with the automated copyright enforcement stuff, which was like YouTube's Content ID, that's their AI program, and Facebook's Rights Manager, that's theirs, which also regulates Instagram. So, I mean, I wasn't necessarily using those AI programs so much as like in one of my papers, I'm actually uploading recordings of classical music just to see how pervasive the issue is. And so I was testing each of their models or each of their programs to see like what it does. And so that's a method called black box tinkering, where the black box is where like the machine has made a decision and you don't quite understand how it came to that conclusion. And so black box tinkering is where you're just like, well, I'm going to try and figure it out by giving it inputs and just kind of seeing what it does on the other end.
and just to be clear with that, Adam, I mean, you're doing nothing but really just trying to upload video or audio to
Correct.
Instagram and getting a thing. How the heck did you not get your accounts banned all the time?
So that's actually a very funny question. So I did for this experiment, for both experiments, I actually created anonymous accounts that weren't my own. So because exactly, I don't want to risk my own YouTube account and my own Facebook account. So I didn't do this on Instagram, and I thought about doing it on TikTok, but at the time, TikTok was still primarily short form video. So this is back in 2022. So before
the dark
TikTok
ages,
a longer form. But yeah. So and I was just I needed to figure out, okay, what am I going to upload? And I was kind of inspired by that Beethoven's 10th Symphony thing. So I decided to take Beethoven's 32 piano sonatas, and that constitutes 102 movements. So I had 102 piano songs essentially to upload to YouTube and Facebook just to see how they would react. Because in all honesty, if these things behave in the way that they should in accordance with copyright law, all of them should have been fine. They were all my recordings. I own the copyright. So, but what ended up happening was they flagged a quarter of them. So it was really quite fascinating. And so I then documented the dispute process and the appeals process. And it's a very long period of time that passes from initially uploading a recording that you're hoping to generate money with to then on the back end finally being allowed to generate money, because if you get a copyright claim, you're not allowed to make any money off of that video. It takes about 3 months, like max. It takes 3 months to go through the entire process to finally start generating your first penny on a video. So you can imagine how musicians during COVID must have been dealing, might have been feeling, right? Since they're not able to perform live anymore, and that was supposed to be the viable alternative. So that's how I started out, but I don't use generative AI. Now, I mean, that doesn't mean I haven't used it, but like for my work, I don't use generative AI because, aside from any personal moral issues that I might have, I'm also a scholar. I'm an academic researcher, and so there's all sorts of questions about copyright. There are questions about plagiarism. Because at first we always thought that plagiarism was taking someone's idea and claiming it as your own. But what if I'm taking something that I technically did not write and still claiming it as my own? If I'm just copy pasting a sentence or perhaps a few sentences, from ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or what have you, and putting it in my paper, that could be an act of plagiarism, which isn't a legal it isn't a legal a legal mechanism for accountability, but an ethical mechanism for accountability. So
what about if you're doing, since you're doing that in academia, what about citing the source as coming from GPT? Is there citations for that now?
That's a really fantastic question. I've gotten that question before at conferences, and so APA, Chicago, and MLA, which are all citation format or writing style guides, right, have come out with, and I'm sure others have as well, but those are the three that I'm most frequently using or familiar with. have come out with guidance on how to cite and reference ChatGPT, Gemini, or any other sort of chatbot. The problem is that means you're offloading authority from yourself as the author to the machine itself. And so what if it is hallucinating and I'm just copy pasting it as though it's fact? People are reading my research as though it's expert knowledge. And, you know,
I mean, you still, when you're researching a paper, you still have to sort through what's bunk and what's real. I mean, so I'm not sure how that where that falls.
Well, that's true, but all of that can be traced back to a particular source. When you're saying that it's ChatGPT, that's not saying that you've traced it back to the New York Times, or that's not saying that you've traced it back to the Journal of Academic Librarianship or what have you, or CNN. You're saying that ChatGPT, you know, manifested this this piece of text from a prompt that I gave it. And but more importantly, you're saying that the machine is the authority on this. If you're giving it citation and reference, like you would any person, then you're saying the machine has authority. And that's most certainly not true. We certainly don't credit our hammers for building our houses, do we? So I don't know why we would do the same thing with generative AI.
Right, because it's not the actual authority.
You might be transparent about it, which is different than citing it as an authority. So, for example, you know, the programs that you use for your artwork, you might be transparent about saying, like, this is a piece of artwork that I made, and the base, you know, and the base of it was generated by, you know, such and such AI tool, and that's fine for transparency, and I agree with that. I fully support that. But we certainly don't say that the AI is responsible for all of your artwork, right? So it's the same sort of thing. I can't just offload authority for my papers onto ChatGPT or Gemini or what have you. But sometimes I will say that a very useful way to use it is for translation. And so there are many papers out there that aren't in English. I only read English. I only speak English. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll copy paste things that aren't in English into it, so that way I can see what it's translating to, so that way I can see if I can use it in my papers. And then I indicate that they've been translated with.
And that is much more algorithmic than generative.
Exactly.
And by the way, right now, we can't get definite answers on this for two reasons. One, the government shutdown. And two, it's controlled by the Copyright Office, and there's nobody in the Copyright Office either right now. So
that's true. But the Copyright Office has come out with a series of reports indicating exactly what Frank was mentioning, that there is a certain threshold of human creativity that must be met in order to register an AI generated work that has been edited by a human for copyright registration. But you're right, it's fact specifics on a case-by-case basis. And if we don't have a register of copyright, we have really no way to identify that sort of thing. There's a lot more research that has to be done, and we couldn't be at a worse moment in you know, legal history, I suppose.
We need to do like a legal show just on this, because that case is actually at the Supreme Court right now.
Yes.
In this session to decide whether that person should have the job or not. So one of the things we always ask people is, what is your dream technology? What would you want to use that would make this perfect for you, that would allow you to do this? And we have, since, because somebody tried to get away with it, we have banned teleporters and time machines. You cannot have those. But anything else, what technology would you like to have?
I would like to have a VR set that doesn't give me motion sickness.
They're pretty close now.
I got a Meta 3, and man, it's awesome. But and I'm okay if I do teleporting, but if I do slide move, man, I got so sick.
Did you get a chance to try the Pro before they discontinued it? See, now you're talking my language here. This is one of the things I do. And the Quest VR things, they've downgraded because they had to go batteries and it's lighter and yada, yada, yada. The older devices actually were stronger at being able to prevent that for you. But I hear what you're saying. There's enough people that just get that feeling to it.
I
screen door effect and all the other stuff.
I need to practice on it, because here I am in my tinkering mode, and I want to tinker in VR, and I don't want to be throwing up all the time.
with some of the new pass-through stuff. That's good. Adam, get us out of this. Tell us.
Yeah. I'm actually, so on the generative side, I would really like it if we were just making things that not only were useful, but ensured that they didn't de-skill specialists or require specialists to learn like a new set of skills to then become supervisors of the technology. And I mean that because I'm very concerned about creative labor, and I'm very concerned about the same things that the WGA and SAG-AFTRA were striking over back in 2023, right? And so I don't mean to say that we can't have these things. I'm just saying let's make sure that we're developing them with the mindset that we want to augment expressiveness and not de-skill our artistry. And so that would be on the generative side. On the other side, I'm also a really big fan of automating menial tasks, things I don't want to do. For example, like I want to make art. I want to make music. I don't need a machine to be doing that.
Let the robot do the dishes for me.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly like as soon as you make me a dishwasher that loads and unloads itself, or a washing machine dryer that loads and then folds, that's the AI I want.
Technically, Samsung has that.
Oh.
They have a robot that does load and unload the dishwasher and will put the dishes away.
Like how successfully though, right? Is it breaking things along the way?
It does not. It does not break. I've the report that I read on it was that it is something like 95% successful. It's also well over $55,000,
right?
To load and unload your dishwasher, which is not a practical thing.
Well, here's the problem with that statistic. Google tells me that YouTube's content ID is 99.8% accurate.
Yeah.
So on top of that, like we don't just need like, oh yeah, it's successful this percentage of time. We need true positive, true negative, false positive, false negative statistics in order for us to actually be trusting of these very complex systems, very powerful systems. And so we need far more transparency from corporations when they're reporting these numbers.
Man, you're just giving me all these things that, like, I've got a whole nother season of shows I'm supposed to be doing now. All right. So, Frank, you have been involved in a lot of online conversations on forums and all these things, trying to get the point across of what you're doing versus, the people in pitchforks coming after you on some things. Fill us in on how that is from your side of what do you wish you could really figure out a way of explaining things. And maybe Adam's got a solution for us on how to explain that, no, the world's not going to die because of this. It may burn because of the data centers, but it's not going to burn because of this.
Well, there's a lot of claims about energy and use and things like that. And, I try to steer clear of all that stuff. So like I said, I'm running it on my own machine. It uses less energy than playing Helldivers or Roblox, so that's not an issue. I think maybe the biggest misconception is like that people just type in a prompt and finished art comes out. I'll give you an example. If you look at my website and you look for Dr. Solara, that's something I started with one of my scholar characters from Traveler. I put it into GPT. I worked out. I have an agent that I built that creates visually descriptive prompts, and then I take that in, and then I make like a character study of Dr. Solara. I finally found one that that was coming out consistent. I took that into Photoshop. I wiped out her badge. I put in Dr. Solara in Villani, which is like one of the one of the languages in Traveler, and I made the Traveler badge and all this stuff, and then I brought that into Kling AI, and I had her walking across the wasteland on an alien planet in front of a shuttle, and then I went and found some walking through the dirt sound effects, and layered that in and put it all in Vegas and made a short video out of it. So it's actually like a it's a multi-step process. It's not just like I type in a thing and finished art comes out. Another example would be kind of ties into what Adam said. I put up some like back on the YouTube channel. Actually, you can find Dr. Solara on the YouTube channel as well. But on the YouTube channel, I wanted to do like what's holidays like in the future. So I have people kissing under the mistletoe on the ship, or pumpkins all around the, on the ship, and spooky music. I have one with like a shambling mummy, and then a professor and the pilot kind of going back and forth. And I used 11 Labs audio filter to change my own voice. So people go, well, how do you make it sound so it doesn't sound like it's AI voice? Because AI voices are stilted and yada yada. Well, it's because I voiced it, I emoted, I'm a voiceover actor, so I just use that as a base. And then I made a younger and an older version. And if I wanted a female, I could add a female character in there as well. And then I just have this back and forth going. So, and then you take it into your video thing and you edit it. It's not just, it's not lazy. It's not easy. It's not skillless. It's not slop. Yes, you can make slop, but human artists can make slop. Human artists are bad at drawing hands. Human artists can misspell things. Human artists can put out crappy stuff.
There's a reason why Mickey only has so many fingers.
Yeah. I was making a joke that Inigo Montoya hates AI because he's always looking for the six-fingered man.
So, Adam, tell us about, because you're the one who's much more of an expert than us on this detection type idea of along those lines of, because, and one of the things Frank has said, and I've read in a lot of conversations, is like, well, all this slop is going to drown out human artists. Yeah. And people may want to buy from the human artists like I do. I hire human artists to do stuff for my games and things like that. But for the general person who's not going to care that enough like that, the AI stuff is just going to overwhelm, and there's not going to be a way for humans to make product, to make a living, to do these things. How does that, is there a way to detect the difference in that rat race where it's going to get better, and then you got to detect better, and you got to look better? And is there
first I first want to highlight the fact that this is not technically anything all that new. The idea that that we might not be able to tell the difference between something that's artificial versus something that's whatever word you want to use, organic, authentic, genuine, etc. Right? For example, on cruise ships, cruise musicians are often accompanied by a backtrack recording of other musicians in order to support their own music, and so at first it was just meant to support musicians to fill out the sound, right? But now you're able to hire unskilled musicians, so musicians who maybe played in high school with no real professional aptitude, and because the background track is just so good, they don't necessarily have to sound good. They can skip the parts that they're not very good at, and so a recording fills in, and then they come back in for those. It's even worse than that. Some cruise ships hire people to just hold instruments and to look like they're playing. So, and you can't tell because all the instruments are mic'd, and they're all just playing, and you just assume what's coming out of the speakers, out of the sound system is what you're seeing. And because
so Adam, you're telling me I was cutting edge as a freshman in high school because I was in marching band carrying a trumpet that I did not know how to play because I was still taking my trumpet lessons, but I was in marching band right away. And so I was ahead of the game by pretending to play marching on the football field. Okay,
and we do that in concert and marching band too, where we know that if we're not very good at a particular musical phrase or what's called a run, so a very rapid or a very complex part, but we know our stand partner, the person who's sitting or standing next to us, can do it really well, we'll just sit out. And we're not only, we don't only think to do that, we are trained to do that. In many cases, band directors will say, you know what, for that run, since you just don't have the lick down just yet, go ahead and sit this one out because your stand partner really has it. Because technically they should be playing it together, and it should sound like one instrument when they play together. Well, the best way to solve that problem is to just have the one the one musician who can play it actually playing it. So now imagine that we have backtracks, and you don't have musicians, you have actors, you have stage actors, and they're not, and so long as the audience has the visual cue of people up there on stage, seeing their hands moving and looking like, they're like, let's say it's trumpet, right? Looking like they're moving around playing, and they hear it as as feedback. They hear the music. It's perceived to be real. Now, you would have to have a very good ear, a very trained eye. You would have to be a musician, skilled musician, to know that they're lip syncing, right? Like how many
those animals at Chuck E. Cheese were really playing
those animatronic bands? Yeah, right. Yeah. So same kind, not exactly the same deal. It's more like we've always had technology there to try to fool the human senses, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes very intentionally, such as in the case of this cruise ship scenario. Very intentional to fool the human senses. So what about AI? What about AI video, AI voices, AI imagery? Right when Joe Biden's voice was used during the 2024 New Hampshire primary in order to get Democrats not to vote during the primary, everybody thought that was Joe Biden's voice. When Marco Rubio's voice was cloned more recently, about 6 months ago, I think, to contact foreign delegates and other Congress members and other politicians, everybody thought that was Marco Rubio's voice. And so the human senses, as specific scenarios and situations will demonstrate, and as many, like a lot of research has shown, the human senses are terrible at differentiating between what is real and what is AI generated. And when I say real, I mean whatever authentic, humanly generated, something that's authentic or genuine.
You're not making me feel better, Adam.
I apologize. This is a very depressing conversation.
No. I know. I read your paper. I know how bad it can be.
It can be very.
The thing is, we can't really blame AI, because before that we just had voice impersonators.
Well, that's correct. That's exactly right. We should not be blaming AI. I mean, and that's not my intention here. I'm not here blaming AI. Mm-hmm. I'm here saying that we now have a very low barrier of access, very inexpensive asset, or very inexpensive tool.
Yeah, the guy who did the Joe Biden thing did it for $20 or something, right?
Yeah. For sure. I mean, well, yeah, absolutely. Or you can do it professionally, like in the Tom Waits case, when you had him, when you had a sound alike doing voiceover or song over, I guess, for Frito-Lay commercials. Same thing with Bette Midler and the Ford Motor Company. So for Ford,
that stuff all goes back to copying people's likenesses or style, which is something I'm against.
So and I just had that conversation about with someone, James Earl Jones, and his intentional recording of stuff and leaving it to his estate, so someone would be in charge of, this is my vocal likeness, and I am okay with them using it in further Disney Star Wars things, but I don't want it used in these other ways.
And that you can do under publicity right laws. And publicity right laws vary from state to state. Most of the states in the United States have them, but they are, and they're all very similar, but also different. They're enforced in different ways, and they have different terms and conditions. But there is no federal, national spanning, rights of publicity. So these things are handled basically at the circuit court level, and that's just kind of where they stay so far. But we have nothing like that for just the everyday common person. So we have what's called the public figure, and we have the private figure, or the public figure and the private citizen. And that's because James Earl Jones's likeness, his name, image, likeness, which includes his voice, has market value. Your voice, my voice. Well, I don't know. Maybe yours, Bob.
That's stretching the limits of
this podcast. I'm telling you, it's up there on like everybody's playlists.
Yeah.
But,
at least in the library world, it is. Maybe.
Yeah. It absolutely is. That right. Our voices don't carry the same kind of market value, which is why Scarlett Johansson can get her legal team together to scare the pants off of OpenAI with a variety of additional evidence to show that they explicitly used her voice. But if they did that to me, I have no legal recourse aside from possibly false light, and I'm not even sure if that applies. And I don't mean to mention something without explaining it, but that can be a conversation for another time, perhaps. The legality of things can be a conversation of another time.
One more question for you guys, because we've already flown through a whole hour. I know we can keep going. I know, but I want to respect your time. I thank you very much both for being here for all of this. This sounds like a stupid question after a couple of the things we've already said, but one of the things we always talk about is, can you make a career out of this passion? Frank, I mean, can you? I mean, you're yeah. I mean, you're doing cool stuff.
I think you can. I mean, it's just opening up. I mean, but what are the job titles? I mean, what what are businesses actually hiring? I mean, the stuff I'm doing is just stuff out of my brain. Like I thought it would be cool to have a text-based dungeon master that could play any kind of genre for people who just like to do solo games. And so, that I started testing that and I was kind of obsessed with it. And then I was like, oh man, I need to learn Python and all this stuff. So I did. And, I end up, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but
a man of many talents is where you are.
If you can clear the way for, the naysayers and tag your stuff if they want you to or whatever, I kind of feel like it's making people tag, I used Photoshop or I used a paintbrush, and so I'm not, but I can understand why people, they don't want to look at it or they want to be able to filter it out. That's fine. And people should be able to also opt out of training data if they want to. Yeah, if you take the care out of it, my top selling item in my on Drive-Thru-RPG is has AI assisted art on the cover and color plates throughout, and it's a silver bestseller. So people can't really tell me that they hate AI art and AI art is slop and it can't compete or whatever. It's not. Today I was talking about it's Schrodinger's artwork. It's simultaneously slop and also putting artists out of business. Depending, you won't know until you look at it.
Yeah.
Right. That's fine.
Tell us, Adam.
Yeah. I think you can make a career out of it, whether it's doing what Frank does, using it for actual artistic purposes, or doing what I do, criticizing it all the way through. Not the art, of course, but the machines themselves. And so, I think there are ways to build careers around AI in the same way that we've built careers around the internet. And that's what AI is going to be, if it isn't already. I think it already is there. I think we're reaching that kind of ubiquity very, very soon. I mean, there's AI in my phone, there's AI in my TV, there's AI in my refrigerator, there's AI in my washing machine. It's just not doing the things that I actually want it to do. But there's AI in everything. So in the same way that we started just putting Bluetooth in everything, we're putting AI into everything. So I think there is a way to build a career out of, surrounding, whether it's the AI industry, whether it's content recommendation, content recognition, content generation. I think the biggest barrier on the content generation side, though, is the only reason why you get into, aside from just the love of, creatively expressing yourself, but the reason why you make a business out of making art and music and stuff like that is through remuneration. The idea that you will be able to protect it in some way and then sell it, and then the way that you're going to recoup or not necessarily recoup, but the way you're going to generate income is through copyright royalties and being paid for use, not trying to dominate the market through individual sales. The vast majority of money being made in the music industry is through remuneration, through mechanical royalties and stuff like that. And so if you're now generating a whole, if you're now generating a whole genre of art that may not be copyrightable, then what was the, from a business standpoint, what was the point in doing it in the first place? If you now have to, if it just doesn't meet whatever the Copyright Office's threshold is, right? Because we still don't know what that threshold is. And so, we obviously saw a lot of Frank's artwork here, and a lot of it is wonderful and everything, and everything. But does it pass this untested, phantom boundary between what is copyrightable and what is not copyrightable? So now when you talk about that, it's yes, of course it's valuable because art for art's sake, but is that going to put food on the table? Is it going to put a roof over your head? Mm-hmm. And it may not anymore. if we're just all going to move in the way of AI. However, I think that's also a solution in and of itself, because if Disney and Paramount and Comcast and all these other media
I
content
think it's
creators,
just Disney and Paramount now. I think those are the only two companies left.
right, well, whoever buys Warner Brothers, they might be dissuaded from using generative AI for their works because now they're not sure if they can copyright their assets or trademark their assets.
Yeah.
That's also another bill.
Okay. Man, I told you guys I was going to let you go, but I got another question now. Do you got just a couple of minutes for me?
I can stay as long as you like.
Okay. Because Adam, you just brought up the whole idea of this. Someone's going to have to stop using it.
Yeah.
Which, and a lot of people have said, we are in an AI bubble and it's just getting blurred and it's going to collapse.
Yeah.
And I know a good chunk of that is because of all the financial pinnings behind it and how much a company is valued based on wishful thinking, and this company's loaning money to this company or setting up a contract with this company and then getting another contract to all the circular money flow stuff. What do you two think happens when the bubble breaks? And I'll give you a Daily Tech News Show had a great comment on this. When the .com bubble broke, the companies like pets.com went under, but the people who put in the fiber, who built the servers, stayed in business and kept on building stuff.
Yeah.
Namely, people like Amazon, who went all the way through it. How do you two see this happening for the AI industry right now, from both the user side, and what are the pieces that somebody can say, okay, you know what, as part of my career, I know I'm going to be using AI, so I'm going to focus on this kind of bit of thing because I think that's going to survive the collapse.
I just think you should maybe, if you're, it's ubiquitous, it's in everything. It's going to be even more so as time goes on. And it's going to, I think, like help people make decisions about stuff, maybe help you make up your mind, yeah, there's going to be a bunch of junk. I mean, like when they first started coming out with like WYSIWYG web editors, everybody can make a website, and it made the websites look like crap, and everybody had the same website, and but web studios are still in business, and there's a difference between a website that you make at home with no training and a website that a professional makes, and they're just not the same, even if you have the same toolkit. So, there's still going to be room for people with people's expertise, and you're still going to need the AI doesn't spontaneously decide to do things, at least not yet. So, it's going to still need human guidance, a task to do. And, it's just going to get better and better as it goes, and more accurate. And it's going to be in everywhere and everything. And, you can fight it, I suppose, but, it's going to, you're just making a perceived bubble around yourself, but you're still in the AI environment.
Adam, am I John Henry?
Of course. So, but I agree with what Frank said. I mean, just because we had the .com bubble and that burst didn't mean that the internet went away. So I think it's recognizing what your product and assets are. Like if your product and assets are actually just an idea, then you have nothing material. You have nothing of like concrete. You have no concrete capital or anything like that, right? So Amazon was able to stay in business because they realized that what they had was not a bookstore. They had an online platform where they could sell anything, whether it be books or monthly subscription, monthly medication, monthly prescriptions, or when they acquired Whole Foods, all of a sudden they're a grocery store, right? So they just kept, so they're not a grocery store, they're not a pharmacy, they're not a bookstore, they're just this.
They're AWS.
They're right. They are the infrastructure. They are a digital infrastructure, right? Mm-hmm. That also has physical manifestations in the various products that either they sell through with their marketplace partners, or they sell them themselves, like through Amazon Basics or their various AI technologies like like the Echo and the Echo Dot. So I totally agree with Frank that like just because the AI bubble may burst, but AI is not going to go anywhere. I mean, it's just ultimately it's going to consolidate and it's going to show us like what the real AI product is. And so yeah, I think that's what it is. And I mean, whether to Frank's point, whether or not AI is going to start spontaneously making its own decisions. Research is already showing, and I am afraid to mention this, but research is already showing that frontier models through the black box problem and reward hacking are beginning to make their own decisions of their own volition. So we do have some, but that's okay, because if AWS goes down, if the Amazon servers go down, all of our problems are solved.
Well, you know, one of the cool thing. Well, you know, I keep saying I like to tinker, and in generating the virtual game master, what I ended up building recently was a virtual. People were snarkily saying, well, what would really be impressive is if you made a virtual player. Okay, so that's what I did. So now I actually made a framework I call just called Chatbot, and I can make different personas, and I can change the temperature, which is how likely something is to hallucinate, and I can put these things and have them. I can give them a topic and then watch the conversation. And so I adapted that for D&D. I have a player and I have the GM, and then I just watch them play. And some of the stuff, emergent things I've seen is pretty crazy. Like you know, the player was trying to hack a Unix system. It was actually giving the Unix commands. You know, it was so. Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. I've actually used ChatGPT for the same thing, where my sister and I wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, but we have no DM or GM, and so we just made ChatGPT the game master.
Adam, you got to log into my game.
No, I'm sorry.
I do the play-by-post game. You can get in on this. We'll bring both of you in. Okay. Let's. That is a great ending, though, right there.
Right. Yeah.
Because you guys both gave us some hope that after the bubble, we're still all going to be fine. And this is all going to be good. Thank you both. As you saw during this conversation, there's so much more to go through. They both of their contact information and all of their websites and papers and all the stuff that they've authored is in the chat for you. Go read, go look, go reach out. Adam, Frank, thank you so much for this again. If you have a topic you'd like to see us cover one of these months, reach out. Creation Station at broward.org. And we'll see everybody next month.
Thanks, Bob. Nice to meet you.